И малко мобовите се скелват с левел. Не ги отлевелваме. И колко им е скрипнат скейлинга.
Да, бе. То маняк беше близко. Къде да свие. Не, то беше само как герой. То беше вече... Някакво малко. Allez, tu peux te what the fuck? Да, който не дозва тия работи, няма бъде бил. Няма го тези сякаш ще чуят. И какво? Щатите превзеха Венецуела. Чуха, че има гориво там. Ето и ба майка.
Бориш, човек.
Кой е current event, ако? Се говори за current event. Страхте е, че ще пратят с асасини от Израел ли това?
Какво?
О! Няма.
Ето тху часа хилне.
Да, бе. След моя хил. Гледай моя хил го прави. Оп.
Хилнах с 800.
Да.
Аз съм пиян, е.
Нашите ще правят ли дивичи? Обръхме ли му? What the fuck?
Не знам, мой, едвам ги трепим тия мобови. Аз правя 50% от демиджа, и 40% съм направил от демиджа така. Пак даже нямам спининг крейн крик и тия работи още.
Няма. Фон.
Лутвай тия коктейли. Аз си ги обрах.
Освобождая маймуните. Бах, мама, аз ще трябва да...
Я ще се хилвам сам.
Хил да хил. Бах, човек.
Те едините ни правят демидж, той ни хилва, аз съм соло така.
Аз не му един лапал да съм това.
Как ми взима, той с стъпия си 5 ми взима агрото, това викам не прави демидж, как ми взима агрото постоянно?
Някакъв път няма да я получа. Къде? Тя Shadow момент бъде сил.
Не, това спал на 35 импа, дали ще прави демидж сега?
Shadow... Кейтса за 4, ще да бъдеш. Кейтса просто воля да
Шамана? Шамана, що я фака?
Кой? О. 20 секунди.
Седи фака,
Кой това?
направи 60 демидж.
Един е офлайн.
Я ти дай да кикнем това другия, защото аз не мога киквам.
Опа, много кадър да видя.
В лейне. Добре, намерихме хора, поне дано да правят нещо.
Види не ям де. Не бих изчесал. Виж го, Хънтера тръгна назади, Митко. Митко, Хънтера тръгна назади и другия деф.
То... Не знам кой е така. Това са само някакви маняци от Венецуела, За кой по-един тръгна? За кой всички тръгват назади, бе?
Ало, the dungeon is here. Дай го ти прави.
Той идва. Не знам, какво става тази вечер? Какви сте артисти? Straight up to ясно съм, я вижди кой е. Добре, паладина поне прави 500 DPS.
Ето е в фул... Да го ема... Беде... На мен ми трябва и килър.
Внимай бомбичката.
Това бомба аз съм на камъка.
Че... Това е... Варвак.
Бай, мога. Мога е битка, виж битка.
Ай, то за първи път прави този дънжан,
Виж битка.
Митко, хилвай!
Точно
Аутист!
подмени се, мръдни малко.
Не мени, другия аутист!
Кой битка аутист?
Умря той!
На твоя.
Бойко оръжие ми даде, ой.
Бойко.
От 10 на 15 на 27.51, ай. Holy shit upgrade.
Майти Бойко.
Бе, това дали не ми дигна DPS, по 2?
Подня. Сиво оръжие на оръжие.
Не, беше от синьо, ама синьото ми беше 10-15, това е 27-51.
Пичето япва си едно това гер.
Ако това беше класик, щеше да не се апгрейд.
Беше класик, мен. От класик е за лузер ник биердови на 40 години.
Казах го човека, който 3 години играят Rat of the Lich King.
И кой има за риби? Кой виж, човек? Който ми каза, аре, стиг да лорна, иначе е забавно.
Първоначално аз няма игра, научвам уни работи, не мога да игра, но и отведнъж не мога да спря,
Иде COVID. Значи може да скочиш директно до опа.
Вече може ли?
Това не ги си може.
Не, при не можеш. Класик, не можеш. Ай. За коги?
Те седат на едно място.
Да, ти това знаеш, че ще седат на едно място, нали?
Знам, защото го направих по-рано. И даже не много тисна. Защото опитах да те изстреля по-рано, но си викам, аз ще седат на едно място. Покачвам се от това. Абе... Куче. Моля един съм.
Аре, той като тръгне боса, ще свърши това,
Падна хилът. Той му свърши джунджурия.
Да не трябва да се развива кранчето така.
Канче. Друго май. Но то виж как ме дурят така, бе.
Босът, що толкова бързо умира с тия новите?
Как ще правят PS. ако не мога го лутна. Вообще. Став. 44. За какво став за 20 лева дати? 27 лева съм с 110 интелект.
Да, аз ти казвам, някакви но рандомайти ми има.
То скейлинг.
44 интелект, е.
Само в класик на 60 лева от става.
Да, бе.
Ай, тя не е става приебали скейлинг.
Виж моя вепън. Колко му и демиджа, чек.
Това е за 20 пъти лева. Смисъл, горе изглежда в рамките на нормално. Да, нормални стати. Моя гледаше с пляскан 50 интелект. А тук трябва да отправиш мобите от тук и ти да седиш вътре за бум. Това е някакъв папагал му запука витка,
Ма за ко трябва да влезнеш вътре, чек?
тук запука му втори папагал, умирам.
Ти ретарднат ли си, чек?
Е, ти какво седиш и си птички там вътре в стаичка? А тук е малко по-насам, пулни някой друг му ама...
Да, Митик плюс.
Имаме хора, къде правят GPS най-вече, най-после. Седи бички отзад. Какво от такива?
Но пак съм втори по демидж.
Да. Казвай двете да придат, да се прави.
Взех едно оръжие.
Къде е мистер Смайт?
Малко е апдейтнати.
Сега. Смайти.
Не ми трябваше, аз ще хилвам се.
Къде към Дими ще прави? Хилвай се. Това е баш Дими.
Но той има нямам енерджи.
Не, това е браво, Те кучета нямам ленат в тен, те са неграмотни. Уния от сега. Ела тука малко назад. Те гледай ко стават, тия 5К димища. О, майка. Опа, че било?
Да. Калкулиран. Да, песен, сериозно ли са Pay 5, 6, 7, 9, ой? Песента Pay 5, 6, 7, 9. На припева, ой.
Да, е скипил. Да, е рандом филми, къде гледам с някакъв маняк, къде казва 6-7 и някаква негър. 2003 филм. Някакъв би нашия отради тук. Там си. Ой, паднах. Ой, скочих от това и паднах през малко. Чакай. Чакай, let me tell you something. Дай, газ. Какво гледаш? Идол. Газ, къде?
Would say like, oh, what about the Navy SEALs? You know, the Navy SEALs, if they were doing this, apparently like some military people were saying like, yeah, there'd be like 30 casualties, 4 podcasts, and like a few movies. You send in Delta Force, shit's getting done, okay? You're sending in Maverick from Rainbow Six Siege, it's getting done. So anyways, yeah, basically the idea was that, you know, as these strikes were happening, and apparently they happened on like military locations, so like military bases, like closed off ports and airports. So it doesn't seem like the civvies were that much affected. It actually turns out that the civvies, from what I'm reading, are actually kind of enjoying the fact that, you know, their actual like leader, Nicolas Maduro, has actually been completely removed from office. Now, from my understanding, not many people liked Maduro. This is like old Biden talking about it. Trump talks tough on Venezuela, but admires thugs like Nicolas Maduro. So even he will say like, yeah, that guy's a fucking thug. Now, obviously, I don't think talking tough aged really well. Because the motherfucker sent in the goddamn special ops to take care of the situation. You know, even Canada jumped in and they were like, yeah, Canada closed its embassy in Venezuela. We've refused to recognize any legitimacy of the regime. So, you know, Canada, you know, who's kind of like the world's nicest guy, alongside Denmark, is like, yeah, that guy's fucked up. That guy's wrong. Now, obviously, Canada will say everyone should respect international law. Yeah, the reality of international law is it's like, what are you really gonna do when Team America World Police fucking rolls in? You know what I mean? So anyways, on the night that the Chinese delegation was allegedly visiting this fucking dude, they sent in the special ops to kind of grab him. And yes, there actually is a photo of him grabbed. So literally on the USS Iwo Jima, one of the best gosh darn maps on Battlefield, you got a picture of what appears to be not Saddam Hussein, not Dr. Disrespect, but Nicolas Maduro holding a bottle of water as he awaits entering the United States, where apparently he is actually going to be facing an actual indictment, him and I believe his wife, on U.S. soils. So not only do they take over your country, they're bringing you back to try you in courts. Now you might be sitting there wondering, what's in those files? But you know, whenever you see like the pizza places around the Pentagon apparently like sparking up at 2 in the morning, things are about to get wild in the world. I feel like this is the new indicator for world fucking for new kind of shit like this. Anyways, to move on with it, yes, obviously the US government has arrested a world leader. Now, initially, I thought this was probably because, oh, they want to be tough on drugs. Now, to give you an idea, this didn't just happen in a vacuum, for instance. Like, obviously, there has been a lot of buildup to this actual event. Now, Nicolas Maduro, for instance, is not a beloved individual. For anybody that needs to look at it, his administration has overseen a spectacular economic collapse, characterized by hyperinflation and chronic shortages. His rule became known for allegedly rigged elections, food shortages, and human rights abuses. So for a lot of people in Venezuela who are subject to this kind of, you know, shit, this is honestly probably a net good for them, right? Like, ultimately speaking, you know, you don't have to be the biggest lover of the United States, but at the end of the day, for the people living there that had to deal with like a despotic regime, you know, seeing a regime change not necessarily is a bad thing for them, right? Like, ultimately, you know, it's kind of like whacking a guy like Kim Jong-un, right? Like, you know, there's probably ulterior motives for the U.S. doing it, which we'll get to, but ultimately for the people living there, it seems like they're all pretty much appreciative that the biggest, like, stick in the West decided, yeah, we're gonna start like whacking people, okay? Like, at this point, you know, some people who live there probably are just like, yeah, this is kind of a positive. You've got like the Venezuelans in South Florida who are like, hell yeah, this shit is awesome. We got rid of this motherfucker. And the thing about a lot of people that like are refugeed into like Florida, they have like, a huge history, from my understanding, of like refugees from places like Cuba and a lot of Latin countries, is that they come from regimes that are not necessarily kind in terms of human rights. So ultimately, is probably a net good for these people. So going into the Venezuelan subreddit 8 hours ago, que maldita obra de arte esta foto. So of course when you go down you get like comments like es increíble que los gringos creen que estas hilenas de propaganda estadounidense por apoyar la captura de Maduro. Grande Venezuela finalmente libres. Which, again, from what I understand, translates to, it's so incredible that those gringos believe that that this sub is full of U.S. propaganda for the supporting of the capture of Maduro. Great Venezuela, finally free. So ultimately, for me, I really like to understand and read from like various cultures, what they feel about it, right? Like what do they feel?
Това е за Dark Moon, то ти къде ги събирам ти още.
At the end of the day, I wanted to kind of realize like why this was happening. Now, this thing didn't start in a vacuum. Last year, around this time, January 2025, Donald Trump signed this executive order that was basically turning a lot of these criminal organizations like Tren de Aragua and stuff, like a lot of these street gangs, into terrorist organizations, like foreign terrorist groups. So, for instance, if you were like the cartel, you weren't just like a criminal drug trafficking organization. You became a terrorist organization. Now, for Mexican drug cartels, I'm actually pretty in agreement of that designation, because these people are the same people that will kill journalists, they will kill like mayors, like actual political leaders whenever things happen. Right? The only time cartels stop killing each other is when they're like, "Hold on, boys, we've got elections. Okay, let's kill the people important here first. Then we'll get back to whacking each other." Obviously, around August of last year, they sent destroyers off of the Venezuela. And of course, for 4 months since that, there have been like drone strikes and like, just absolute demolishment of like, ships that were like allegedly trafficking like cocaine or something. Now, again, I don't know the legitimacy of these trafficking claims. Ultimately, you just kind of have to believe the fucking government on that. But that's pretty much like where things sort of ended. It wasn't until literally last night that, of course, the U.S. government went in and grabbed grabbed the Venezuelan leader and basically took over the country overnight. Now, to give you an idea, the government is basically going to be involved in running the country until it's safe, quote unquote. So yeah, Trump's like, we're going to run the country for now. Now, I don't know what for now means. Maybe it's like for the week, maybe it's for the month, maybe it's for the next fucking 20 years. I mean, who really knows, right? Maybe this shit could become the next state for all I know. Anything is really possible in this weird world we live in. Now, ultimately, one of the big things
in Japan do feel an awful lot like an annoying hyperactive threat.
Over here too is that after this had actually happened, Trump was like, the U.S. is going to be very involved in Venezuela oil after the actual attack. Now, again, look, I've been alive long enough to know where this road leads. To give you an idea, for anybody that doesn't really know how many like oil reserves the world has, Venezuela is kind of sitting on some of the top reserves imaginable, right? So Venezuela is actually apparently beyond Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia used to be like the largest oil reserves in the world. So when this whole thing was about, we just want to stop like drug traffickers and like illegal people pushing drugs onto our individuals, remember, if you just look at basic history, Donald Trump was the guy that actually pardoned a fucking drug trafficker. For instance, a presidential pardon actually happened of a former Honduran president for drug trafficking, right? So for anybody that doesn't know, this is a full and complete pardon to Juan Orlando Hernandez, who Trump formally granted the pardon on December 1st, 2025, and Hernandez was released from prison on the same day from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So after the guy basically gets fucking arrested, Hernandez and his co-conspirators trafficked more than 400 tons of U.S.-bound cocaine through Honduras between 2004 and 2022. President Trump asserted that Hernandez had been treated unfairly. I don't really know how you can treat a drug trafficker as unfair, but to give you an alleged drug trafficker now, but he was actually condemned for this kind of stuff too, right? There were people in the government who condemned for pardoning a guy who was convicted and to 45 years in federal
Delicious presents from the sky.
into the United States. Now, ultimately, if this was about, drugs being trafficked, well, I mean, come on now. That'd be fucking insane. But really, it's mostly about oil. So I imagine, in the next, like, one of my favorite things is watching
British banter
scenarios. Like, I've talked about this years ago. But, watching these scenarios where, like, again, you see these, like, big, scary emergency alert broadcasts, when missiles are falling from the sky and, like, crazy world events are happening. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this kind of shit happening, okay? Get ready for a future of this spooky crap. But to go back to, like, Venezuelan oil, for instance, yeah, they are the most oil-rich country. And from what I understand, the oil quality also is actually pretty good. Like, Canada comes at number 3. I don't really know much about Canadian oil quality, but I believe a lot of our oil we just don't really even touch, simply because I think it may be inaccessible, or it may not just be as good as, like, Saudi Arabian oil, for instance. But Venezuela, they have a lot of it. They have so much of it that they're beating one of the largest countries in the world. So, of course, I'm not surprised that the United States government sent in the Delta Force to basically take over the country overnight, because ultimately it was never about drugs, it was never about justice. It really just is about strategy. That's ultimately the goal here. Now,
Имаш клиент, ползвай го, защото ми слага 10 poison тия. Аз си го ползвам чатбот.
You know, you have Russia,
Аз ще го ползвам сам.
in the Ukraine right now. You've got the United States with literally Venezuela. It makes me wonder what the next big situation is. Now, I don't know if you've been following stuff that's been going on, but in Taiwan, for instance, there has actually been a lot of large-scale military drills by the Chinese that are actually raising a fair amount of tensions in the area. Now, what exists in Taiwan that actually matters a lot? By far, the most important company in the entire planet. For instance, if you've never heard of TSMC, I've talked about this because we talk about tech a lot on this channel. These guys basically represent 90% of the world's semiconductor production at 7 nanometer nodes and below. So while OPEC, which is the oil-producing exporting countries, a cartel for oil, they represent 50% of global oil production. This semiconductor company makes most of the chips that me and you use on a day-to-day basis, whether it's in our phones, whether it's in our computers, whether it's in basically any piece of technology that we have. It is by far one of the world's most important companies imaginable. Now, ultimately, what does scare me just a little bit over here is that, you know, given what the U.S. has done to Venezuela, there is almost no moral high ground you can have anymore if the Chinese government decides, yeah, we're just going to take over Taiwan. We're going to go in, we're going to fucking capture the leader, we're going to make it part of China. And once this becomes part of China, you know, I can imagine they would have an insane amount of leverage, not just over the United States, but the rest of the world. Now, granted, Taiwan is, from my understanding, protected in some, like, roundabout way by the U.S. government. Like, there are assurances, but assurances don't matter for shit when you look at history itself, right? Again, the U.S. government, I think, should have protected Ukraine. I don't think they sent in any military. Nobody really did. Nobody wants to get into a war. Everyone tries to avoid World War III literally as much as they can. And every country just kind of pushes things a little bit. So you would think that the U.S. government invading Venezuela on the night the Chinese delegations are there would be pretty huge, but maybe nothing's gonna happen. So again, ultimately the thing about it is, you know, for China, who's one of the largest nations in the world alongside the US, they might be like, well, fuck it. You know, everyone's
Аз
just
съм
taking
ти
over
споделил
all the
клипа, аз съм
land.
ти споделил,
And why not us take
Гледам anyway, тъй,
Няма геша.
за какво?
Закони.
Гледам за Венецуела, как ще се натилака.
take over the land that matters to us the most?
Ще им гледаш на Венецуела, те хубаво имат най-големия ори ресурс, ама това не е юзабъл ойл. Не е като той ойл, който си мислиш. Той е крудо ойл това.
Което се рефайнва на юзабъл.
Той рефайнва са 10% от него.
Я знам, ама някак каза, че си имат доста хубаво качество на ойла. Is oil usable?
И казвам, че не е юзабъл, обаче много малка част от него остава след рефайнмент. И е скъпо да се рефайнва. Те, които Венецуела ойл им беше юзабъл, щяха ли са една от най-инфлатираните държави в света? Ти знаеш инфлацията им там каква беше? Това е все едно да кажеш, бе, щатите спечелиха цяла Сахара и хубаво. Ма дури могат да правят с нея. Нареш ли кой ти горе?
Venezuela's oil is challenging to process, but yet highly valuable to specific buyers like the US.
Те US просто искат да имат всички ойл на света, не че е юзабъл. Просто искат да имат монополи на света. Саудия Арабия ойла си остава най-скъпия арабския.
They might even get involved trying to protect.
Sunt най-valuable, не най-скъпи.
How important they are for the entire world, let alone themselves. Like I said, none of these countries act in a manner that is beneficial to the rest of humanity. They're always self-serving and self-interested. That's pretty much how things go. Now, of course, that's just how I assess this stuff. To me, the U.S. government kind of had a moral high ground. But after the Venezuela thing, there really isn't any sort of moral high ground. So yeah, Venezuela got taken over by the U.S. Crazy shit, man. Crazy shit.
Switchва между agility и интелект, friend.
Me, Mutahar, and we really live in a fucking wild world. I used to say nothing ever happens. Oh, no.
На тебе ти го дава като стат, това на мен ми дава agility.
So yeah, we got Venezuela taken over before GTA 6 drops. So, ultimately, at the end, I just have to ask again. Hey, those files must be insane. Those Epstein files.
So when someone recently approached...
Този мима накрая вика, those Epstein files must be insane. За да ковърва факта да обявява война.
А ти гледаш ли в момента как Google и YouTube ще бъдат акварнати от евреи също? И всичко ще се държи от евреи в момента.
Ето, медията се държи от евреи като цяло. Това си от крайверите.
Да, ма и Google и YouTube. Google, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, всичко.
CEO-то на Google и CEO-то на YouTube са евреи.
И Марк Зукербърг той е евреин.
Но това вече е формалят името за евреи си го държат от крайверите.
Не знам, ма някой трябва да марширува пак към Полша.
Всичко се държи от евреите. Менеджмента на МОЛа е евреи.
We've got to be wild. If everything is happening before we even get a crack at looking at the reality there. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like if you dislike it, I am out. Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and this is not my monthly Linux cope video, okay? In reality, ladies and gentlemen, long story short, Windows is dying, okay? October 14, 2025, if you don't update from Windows 10 to 11, you might not get those fancy security updates. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I
kind of
install that juicy Arch Linux. The really complicated elitist version of Linux that people on Reddit or the internet can't stop saying that they use, okay? And I'm proud enough to say that I've stopped using it.
Insane.
I don't have a target. I need a target. I don't have a target. I need a target. I don't have enough energy. I can't use that yet.
Reasons. Now, one of the things on my channel is I don't want to sit here and just gas up Linux and say, oh, it's the greatest thing. It's got
I don't have a target.
Okay?
Can't use that yet.
Is the user error sometimes.
I need more energy.
I'm updating my Linux installation, and unfortunately, after I would say 2 years,
I need more energy. I'm out of range.
Arch Linux and just minding its own business, I broke the installation. Okay, there was one update that came in, and literally it just froze my entire system up. Now, normally, if your system freezes up during
I need to get closer.
Black screen and everything, you might shit yourself. Most modern operating
se to
systems,
Dungeon
like
Nukem
Windows, for
tječe.
instance, will probably
To
roll
cookie
back
simulatora
and
neće
recover
makir
things
kad je ono
and
vrijeme.
probably get you back to a computer just fine. Systems like Mac OS are so baby-proof that you could probably delete everything important and still somehow
Bukvalno u
get a
ovom momentu mi je
functioning
cookie
system
simulator
back. It
ena prava.
truly is
Za
the
spijem da ga
Fisher
to
Price
igram.
of computers. Linux is a lot different, okay? If you want to blow up everything important on your system directory all in one fucking command, you can, all right? Linux literally hands you a sidearm and says, if you want to blow the brains out of your computer, we won't stop you. And you can. Now, of course, there's plenty of versions of Linux that basically are like playing Russian roulette. There is, S-word Linux, okay? For the safety of YouTube's TOS. I'm not going to say it, but basically, if you enter the wrong command on this version of Linux, ooh, it blows its brains out, quite literally.
Защо има Linux версия, къде се казва Suicide Linux и в секундата, в която ентернеш команда, грешно се изстрива. Има Linux, който се казва Suicide Linux.
Каква команда като
И
кажеш?
секундата, като караш грешна команда, после като представиш команда, и директно се изстрива.
Защо?
Не знам. Да пишеш грамотно, Егес.
Now, of course, if you love living life on
Днес
the
като си
edge,
изтриш
I may
Linux 5
recommend
пъти,
this,
дали не ти стане тъп?
But I was a user of Arch Linux, and unfortunately, in the middle of a
пишеш в терминала.
update it crashed, and lo and behold, I basically was staring at a black screen at 2 in the morning. Now, normally I'm not freaking out if I lose my computer because most of my work happens on external drives. Okay, here's a fucking pro tip for people that don't want to pull their hair out when things go wrong. Work and keep all your important stuff on external drives, okay? Because if your computer takes a fat dumpy, at least you won't be completely out of commission, right? That's probably the best advice of the day that I can give you. But of course, beyond all of it, I actually lost my system. And I had a recovery system called TimeShift, which, for anybody that doesn't know, basically when you're using Linux, right, if it's formatted a certain way, you'll be allowed to go into the past, for instance, and effectively just load a state, right? So, for instance, every single thing you're seeing right over here is a version of Linux that has been autosaved. Okay, so like an autosave in a video game, all right, usually it'll happen like maybe every hour. In this situation, if you look at the dates, it happens about every other day, if not, every day. So basically, if my system stops working on, say, the 13th, but I know that it worked on, say, the 7th, I can click on this, hit that fat restore button, and it will take literally seconds for the system to reshift, readjust, and basically get me back up and running, which is one of the reasons why when Linux fails, I'm not necessarily worried. Unfortunately, my version of Arch Linux had this corrupted entirely, and it just didn't actually fucking restore. So at this moment in time, I decided to do the one thing that I probably should have done a long time ago. Stop making things fucking difficult for myself. So I decided to stop using Arch Linux. Now, this is not a video where I'm going to make a negative Arch Linux video. I think it's great. I think a lot of people experimenting and using it is awesome. I've made plenty of videos showcasing people how to use it. But I decided to make the switch just because I noticed a lot of comments in my videos about Linux. Muda, I will never use the Penguin if I have to open up the terminal. For anybody that doesn't know what the fucking terminal is, this is one of the scariest nightmares that anybody who's thinking of switching to Linux actually wants to do. This screen right over here makes it look like you're back in 1991, okay? When computers had you literally typing in exact commands to navigate around and basically see what's on your system. Now, of course, if a lot of people think this is confusing or annoying, I get it, okay? You're somebody that just wants to use their computer. You're not used to terminals and old 90s methods of navigating your computer, and you probably don't want to learn, okay? Dude, you already have way too much shit in your real life to worry about. Why would you come home to learn something this confusing? So I decided, obviously, I wanted to take this chance and switch off to a different operating system underneath the Linux umbrella and kind of see if there was not a better option. Now, I've promoted Linux Mint in the past, and actually the big catalyst was actually PewDiePie's video where he actually did use this on his main system. So I figured, I've promoted this in the past, I've talked about how cool it is. What if I considered switching to it and seeing if this addresses a lot of the problems that many people have? See, a lot of users that talk about Windows actually, at least in my comments, they don't actually like it, all right? They don't want to be using Windows, but they want to upgrade to it because that's literally all they know, and they don't know if there's any other options. But to guide you through Linux Mint, the option is there. Now, when it comes to using this on a day-to-day basis, if all you do is browse the web on your computer, watch some movies, write some documents, and basically do a little bit of graphic design, then I would say the option for at least these 3 blocks is there. Graphic design, a lot of software is still exclusive to Windows and Mac, so I would never in a million years recommend you switch over to Linux if this is primarily where you want to work and you're already established in something that's a professional suite that's not available here, okay? Your
Отдавна ще заряді погудали.
But it's true. If you live outside, if I go to something else and
Это то, что не ми...
Ну, издохнем в същото време.
Ма не нещо, аз се спрях, защото... Окей, това не е нужно да идва в нас, просто можем ходим си ги бием.
Mileage may seriously fucking vary. Now, when it comes to things like gaming, for instance, even that works exceptionally well. But let me guide you through the process. Getting Linux Mint, basically copying it to an actual flash drive as you would a installation for Windows, had me taken exactly a few minutes, didn't have to modify or do anything crazy. Installation literally took faster than Windows. A couple of prompts, me entering in my usernames, my basic locales, things that I would normally be doing in every other system took, again, minutes. After that, the system basically installed, and I was actually pretty shocked to see that everything worked out of the box. So, meaning my graphics card worked out of the box, my system worked out of the box, everything even updated before the installation actually completed, which I quite enjoyed. And, aside from all of that, it just worked out of the box completely well. Now, when it came to my graphics card, a lot of the actual graphics card stuff worked pretty much based on, open source drivers, but it took literally seconds for me to get the more updated version of NVIDIA drivers. And again, this is primarily for NVIDIA. If you have AMD GPUs, congratulations, everything's just baked in, and you don't even have to worry about updating the drivers there. Isn't that fucking convenient? But realistically, the community was so awesome that it took me one Google search to get to this URL, where apparently there was a PPA, which is a repository of updated graphic drivers. So to show you how easy it was to get this installed, and you only have to do this one time, I go to this Linux Mint start button right here. I'm just going to call it the start button because that's how I've been conditioned as a human being to fucking call it. You type in the words software sources, you get this little admin prompt, you authenticate, and ladies and gentlemen, you go to that PPA option, you go to add, and of course, all you got to do is highlight this, right-click copy, and boom, slap that shit in there and hit OK. And once all of that is done in kosher, you go back to the start menu, go to the driver manager, and ladies and gentlemen, at this moment in time, you just pick which version of the NVIDIA driver that you wanted. And of course, I picked the most recent open version of that driver, and all of this happened literally within minutes. I mean, it's crazy to see just how well and how efficient and how quick it was to get this up and going. Now, of course, when it came to a lot of the software that I was using, obviously using the software manager, ladies and gentlemen, I was able to open up a quick app store and basically type in words like Discord. And I was able to install Discord right here, out of the box. No extra setup at all. Ladies and gentlemen, what about Steam, for instance? Right there, boom, you just go here, you click that little install option.
Кстати, да помнишь, шмот няма.
Трябва ми един кредит, че малко седяха.
And boom, things just work out of the box. And if you want any other type of launcher, well, there are actual third-party tools like Lutris, which again allowed me to also install this and use other launchers. Like if I needed to use GOG or fucking heaven forbid Ubisoft launcher, boom, the options are there. So yeah, it was actually surprisingly that easy and up and running. Now, of course, updating the system literally takes no time. There's an update manager which looks just like this. And again, the beauty of updating Linux operating systems over Windows operating systems is no matter how intense the update can be, no matter how deep into your system you go, all you have to do is tap that install option, you give it your password if needed, and then boom, it just does it all the way in the background for you. Now, even if you're updating the fucking kernel itself, you know, no operating system is going to come up and say, hold on, pal, here's a big old black screen, you're going to have to wait until we're done. No, if you actually have something seriously important, it'll just tell you, restart your computer once, and you're good to go. Now, one of the things that I found so fucking impressive about this system was that everything came out of the box and it just worked. One of my biggest issues with Linux has always been putting my computer into sleep mode, which before all of this, it usually was just awake the entire time. Out of the box, I was able to suspend, put my system into those sleep states. It had every single driver installed out of the box, like Bluetooth, for instance, so I could instantly connect my PlayStation controller and use it right there on my system. I could connect anything I wanted, and it just worked out of the box. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about, I'm just waiting for Valve to release their SteamOS that's currently available exclusively on the Steam Deck. And I would say, you don't have to wait for anything, boys. The world is your oyster. Let Uncle Muda guide you through how to get things fucking hacked together on your system. If you go to Valve's website, you can actually build your own Steam machine. Now, this is the Steam machine. Remember back in the day when Valve actually released pre-built gaming computers with, like, Alienware and shit? Yeah, this was a far older version of Linux, okay? You can actually read it just by the fucking hardware requirements. 4 gigabytes of RAM or more. Hard drive, only 200 gigs. You know, it's crazy when like one game alone probably eats up nearly all of that minimum requirement right there. But you see this yellow strip? This image is not compatible with Steam Deck. If you're looking for a recovery image for the deck, visit this link. And that link takes you to the SteamOS recovery menu, where you can in fact download the original SteamOS image and hack it together onto an actual computer. Now, do I recommend you do that? Probably not. This image is designed specifically for this set of hardware. No, in reality, there's another amazing option that I've shown you before called Bazite, which again runs on Fedora Linux. And of course, all of this has even more functionality on top of it, where they provide you a lot of these games working right out of the box, and they work absolutely well. In fact, it's so good that I have this installed on my Legion Go and my computer downstairs, where I actually use it as a straight-up Muda console system, okay? Instead of having a PlayStation 5, I just literally have a console with Steam functionality that literally just has all my games running out of the box. And with cloud saving, it doesn't matter. I could...
Vezi de nekakve 20 sekundi, mă. To, prieteni, аз мога хилна по бързо. Плюс 400. Плюс 400. Плюс 400. Ай, стая, перераз.
Play in front of this computer, I could play on this, I could play in my computer downstairs with cloud syncing. Obviously, all of those files will be shared with each applicable system, which again is all entirely done with a lot of free, cool open source software like SyncThing, or built directly into shit like Steam, or really most gaming launchers on the PC without paying a dime. Now, one of the coolest things that I saw about like Linux gaming guys was apparently a couple of weeks ago, people had started to emulate ray tracing into actual Linux games. Or not Linux games, but just the Linux gaming stack. So for instance, remember that Indiana Jones game that came out with the actual ray tracing being baked into the...
Коре е когато е нещо точно пред тебе. Соре е нещо малко по, нали, когато говоря за нещо пред тебе, и аре е нещо, което е далеч.
Добра нандеска, значи какво е това?
Какво е това, да?
Не знам. Съм не играл.
За кой начин? Не я приброй до 5, преди малко ти ги казах. Не съм неграмотен, аре! Първите 3 ги знаеш. Никога, бе, никога.
Ще даже не се прави.
М. М.
Аз да видя какво е. Кой там
Не, не
дърпа
реши
и-
дойш.
Кой дърпа една антишка на китайци? Само.
Лепо не моята ще голямата.
Бе. Тушката на чушкопек.
Нека съм набава вече. Ай, за кой на тебе постоянно това, бе?
Не знам, бе. Тук съм и заспал постоянно.
Още един пръстен. И unique equipped. Тоест не мога да го еквипна 2 пъти. Ти сера в стата. Да, inventory изгъс. Не, сървъра ни лагва. Няма 4 секунди дилей, като тръгна фърлям нещо, на?
По-добре отколкото 40 секунди делей.
Да. Ай ти в ти.
Туфите, тафите. Газете сега е джедафите. Че?
Таман 30 левел, както те.